a house locked from the outside,
Mhm.
a woman missing from the inside, and a handwritten note that, well, depending on how you read it, it's either just a mundane message about taking a walk or a final farewell.
It is a set of circumstances that presents a real logical paradox.
It sounds like the setup for a locked room mystery novel, you know? The kind where the detective finds a hidden latch or something. But this isn't a novel. This is a real case from September 2014, and it's still unsolved.
You have these physical barriers, the locked doors,
Yeah,
that require a specific tool to engage, a key.
right.
And yet, the tool you need to create that state, the key, was found inside the secured perimeter.
Yeah.
It defies the basic physics of how we lock our homes.
That physical impossibility is really just the start of it. We're looking at the disappearance of Tammy Kingery,
She was a 37-year-old nurse, a mother of 3.
living in North Augusta, South Carolina. And one morning, she comes home from her shift, feeling sick. She lies down for a nap, and then she's gone. She effectively vanishes into thin air while her family is out running errands for less than an hour.
The timeline is exceptionally tight. We were looking at a window of maybe 45 minutes, perhaps even less.
45 minutes.
And within that very narrow window, we have completely contradictory evidence. You have a woman who reports feeling so physically unwell she can't drive.
Right. Lightheaded.
But then she supposedly walks away into a dense forest in 98-degree heat. The two things don't align.
So our goal here is to lay out that timeline of September 20th, 2014 with as much precision as we can. We're going to examine the biography of Tammy Kingery to really understand the pressure she might have been under.
And we have to.
We'll walk through the physical evidence, some of which was found in the woods, and it gets incredibly strange. And then we'll analyze the different theories. Was this a medical episode? Did she leave on her own? Or was it something else?
Foul play.
Foul play. And we have to approach this just with the facts. There are reports of mental health struggles, medication, marital strain. These are not just background details. They are critical variables in understanding the probability of different outcomes. Absolutely. So let's set the scene properly. We have to go back to the beginning. Who was Tammy Kingery before she became a headline?
Tammy was originally from Northwest Indiana. That's where her life began, and significantly, it's where she met her future husband, Park Kingery.
When was this?
This would have been in the mid-1990s. They were both working at a local drugstore at the time.
Okay, so a pretty standard kind of blue-collar American story. You meet at work, you start dating.
It appears so. The timeline of their relationship moved fairly steadily. They got engaged on September 20, 1994.
Wait, September 20th?
Yes. I mentioned that date specifically because her disappearance occurred exactly 20 years later to the day, September 20, 2014.
That is a detail that really stands out, an anniversary. Do we think that's just a coincidence, or is there something psychological there?
In behavioral analysis, anniversaries can often act as trigger events. They force a person to review their life where they were, where they are now. Whether that date is a pure coincidence or a psychological trigger for Tammy it's speculation. But the date itself is a fact.
So they get married, and they eventually leave Indiana. They move south to Edgefield County, South Carolina. That's a pretty big shift in environment.
It was. Park Kingery found a job as a welder in the area, and they decided to settle in a somewhat isolated location. They actually built a house themselves.
Really? They built it?
Yes, in a wooded area just north of North Augusta. And this geography is important. This wasn't a subdivision with neighbors right on top of you. It was a home surrounded by woods, by briars, by nature.
That idea of building the house themselves, it speaks to a certain kind of independence, doesn't it? Like a desire for privacy, maybe?
It does imply a desire for a self-contained family unit. They were building a life, quite literally from the ground up.
And they started a family there.
Yes, they had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. By all external metrics, they were building a life. Tammy also pursued her education during this time.
Oh, okay.
She obtained a nursing degree in 2001 and got a position at NHC Healthcare, which is a nursing home facility. She was still working there when she disappeared.
So, on the surface, you have a nurse, a welder, 3 kids, and a house they built in the woods. It looks, like the American dream. But when we look closer at the situation leading up to 2014, things weren't quite so stable.
The reports indicate significant strain within the marriage.
How so?
While Tammy's father, who was still back in Indiana, said he was unaware of any deep issues, other accounts paint a different picture. Tammy's own mother has stated that the couple had grown distant, especially after their youngest son was born. The subject of divorce had apparently come up.
Divorce is a heavy topic, especially after 20 years of marriage. And it wasn't just the marriage. Tammy was dealing with some Some pretty severe personal struggle.
The medical context here is highly relevant. Tammy had an ongoing struggle with depression.
Was she being treated for it?
She was on medication for the condition. The investigative reports and subsequent media coverage have cited that this depression was linked to other behaviors, including some extramarital affairs and, significantly, prior suicide attempts.
And we bring this up not to judge, but because it establishes a baseline for her state of mind. It's part of the picture.
In any missing person investigation, a history of suicide attempts immediately changes the risk assessment. It shifts the statistical likelihood towards self-harm, though it certainly does not rule out other possibilities. Park Kingery has stated that Tammy often felt that no treatment would ever work for her.
That feeling of hopelessness is such a powerful driver of behavior. So let's zoom in on September of 2014, the weeks right before she vanished. There were some physical symptoms showing up, right?
There were. In early September, her behavior shifted. She started missing days at work, which her husband noted was very uncharacteristic for her.
What else?
He described her as coming home from a shift and just going immediately to bed. Then, around September 16, so 4 days before she disappeared, she began experiencing severe night sweats.
How severe are we talking? Is this just, feeling a bit warm at night?
No, this was severe enough that she would wake up and have to completely change her clothes. She was having trouble sleeping. She was telling her sisters about these issues.
And what did they say?
They advised her to see a doctor to get it checked out.
And she listened to them.
She did. She made a doctor's appointment, but that appointment was scheduled for September 21st.
The day after she disappeared.
The day after.
Wow. Okay, so that brings us to the morning of the disappearance. Saturday, September 20th, 2014, Tammy heads into work for her shift.
Her shift was scheduled to begin at 7 a.m. Almost immediately, her coworkers noticed that her demeanor was off.
Off how? Was she just tired from the night sweats and lack of sleep?
It seems it was more than just fatigue, it was agitation. She was raising her voice in conversation, which was described as highly uncharacteristic for her.
Okay.
But beyond the behavioral observations, there was physiological data. Being a nurse, Tammy checked her own blood pressure.
And she checked it more than once, I remember reading.
She checked it 4 times in a very short span of time. It was high. Her heart rate was also elevated. Her coworkers were actually urging her to try to calm down because her own agitation was keeping her heart rate spiked.
That's a critical point to me. You have a medical professional, a nurse, observing her own physical decline in real time. High blood pressure, rapid heart rate. That can feel like a panic attack, or it can feel like a serious cardiac event. Either way, it's debilitating.
And that physiological state is extremely important when we consider what happened later. If she's experiencing tachycardia and hypertension, her physical capacity for any kind of exertion, like a long walk in the woods, is severely compromised.
So she's physically unwell, she's mentally agitated, and she's at work where she's responsible for patients. She decides she can't stay.
That's right. She called Park. She told him she was feeling lightheaded and wanted to come home. And she specifically said she did not feel up to driving herself.
Which is another crucial logistical point. She leaves her car at her workplace.
Yes. Park drove to NHC Healthcare to pick her up. He arrived around 8:30 a.m. Her vehicle was left in their parking lot. He drove her back to their home in the woods.
They get home. What's the first thing that happens?
Tammy changed out of her nursing scrubs and into pajamas. She immediately laid down to take a nap. This would have been shortly before 9 a.m.
And the house isn't empty at this point. The family is there.
Not everyone. Their daughter had spent the previous night at a friend's house, but Park and their 2 sons were there.
Okay.
Park decided to let Tammy rest. So around 10 a.m., he took the 2 boys and left the house to run some errands.
And this marks the beginning of the window of disappearance. 10 a.m. Park and the boys leave. Tammy is, as far as he knows, in bed, in pajamas, resting.
That is the situation as Park understood it. And this leads us to the verification of his movements.
His alibi.
His alibi.
Yeah.
Park dropped their older son off at his mother's house, so the boy's grandmother, so he could mow the lawn for her. Park then kept the younger son with him, and they visited several stores.
And these movements are verified, right? This isn't just his word.
Yes. Security camera footage from the stores confirms that Park and his younger son were there. This corroborates his account of his whereabouts during this specific time frame.
Okay, so they're out running errands, but they aren't gone for very long at all.
No. Park returned to the house sometime between 10:45 a.m. and 10:30 a.m.
That's an incredibly short window. We're talking maybe 30 minutes total, maybe a little more.
It is extremely tight. If you account for the drive time, the time in the stores, the return trip, The house was unattended for less than an hour, for sure.
And when they get back, what do they find?
They find the family dog outside, and they find the house is locked.
Let's really unpack this locked house detail, because this is the part that just baffles everyone involved.
It's a mechanical contradiction. The main door of the house was a type that could only be locked from the outside using a key.
It wasn't one of those locks you can just turn from the inside and pull it shut.
No, it wasn't a slam lock or a deadbolt you could operate from the inside. You had to physically insert the key into the exterior lock cylinder to secure it.
So if the door is locked, then simple logic dictates that someone with a key had to have locked it from the outside.
That is the only mechanical way for that door to be in that state. However, when Park used his key to unlock the door and go inside, they found Tammy's keys.
Inside the house.
Inside the house.
Along with everything else she would need to function in the world.
Correct. Her purse, her wallet, and her cell phone were all found inside the house.
There was a detail early on about a backpack, wasn't there? Something about a Hard Rock Cafe bag being missing.
That was an initial erroneous report. Law enforcement did say at first she might have taken a Hard Rock Cafe backpack.
That was wrong.
It was later corrected. The family confirmed that that specific backpack had been sold at a yard sale about a week before she disappeared. So she did not take that bag. By all available evidence, she left with nothing but the pajamas she was wearing.
But she did leave one thing, the note.
Yes. Inside the house, they found a handwritten note. It read, "Went for a walk. Be back soon. Love you."
Went for a walk. In pajamas.
That is one of the primary inconsistencies.
And in that heat.
Another's the weather. It was approximately 98 degrees Fahrenheit that day. It was sweltering. The family has stated it was highly unusual for Tammy to go for a walk in the woods at all, let alone in that kind of heat, and especially not when she had just come home from work complaining of being lightheaded.
So the note itself, was it actually her handwriting?
The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, or SLED, they analyzed it. They confirmed it was indeed written by Tammy Kingery. It was not a forgery.
But the family, they didn't just analyze the handwriting. They analyzed the tone of the note.
They did. They found the sign-off, "Love you," to be strange for a casual note about a walk. To them, it sounded more final, more like a permanent goodbye.
And the whole idea of leaving a paper note was weird for her.
That's what they said. Tammy was a constant text messenger. She communicated with friends and family via text all the time. To leave a paper note was, for her habits, considered almost archaic.
So Park finds this note. He comes home, the house is locked in this impossible way, her keys are inside, and Tammy is gone. What is his immediate reaction?
He knew something was wrong instantly. He cited the heat and her medical condition. His first thought was that maybe she'd become confused and tried to walk back to her job to get her car.
That's a very long walk, especially if you're dizzy and unwell.
It is. He left the sons at the house, and he drove the route she would have taken to work, looking for her.
And he found nothing.
Nothing. He then called his daughter, who was still with her friend, and told them to start driving around and looking. He also called his mother-in-law.
So he mobilized the family pretty quickly.
He did. They searched the immediate area themselves. By 2:00 p.m., having found no sign of her at all, they called the police.
This brings in the Edgefield County Sheriff's Office. Now, in a case like this, with a missing person with known medical issues, time is absolutely critical. What was their response like?
They responded with deputies to search the premises. They checked the house for any signs of a struggle or a crime, things like overturned furniture, blood, forced entry.
Did they find anything?
They found nothing unusual inside the house, other than the fact that the woman who lived there was missing.
But they brought in dogs.
They did. Search dogs were deployed. They were provided with the nursing scrubs Tammy had worn that morning to establish a strong scent profile.
And what did the dogs find?
Nothing.
Nothing.
They did not pick up a trail leading away from the house.
That seems very significant. If she walked out that door and into the woods, the dogs should have smelled her.
This is where environmental factors really complicate an investigation. A local canine handler later provided some analysis on this. That extreme heat, 98 degrees, it affects scent tracking significantly. Heat causes air to rise. It creates thermal currents that lift scent particles up and away from the ground.
So the dog basically can't see the smell because it's floating up above their head.
That's a good way to put it. It makes tracking a live subject incredibly difficult.
But wouldn't the heat help in another way? If the worst had happened?
Yes. The handler noted that while tracking a live person is harder in the heat, that same heat accelerates decomposition. That should make it easier for cadaver dogs to detect a body if one is nearby.
So the fact that neither of those things happened.
It's a data point that cuts both ways. It suggests she didn't just walk away on foot, but it also suggests she didn't die in the immediate vicinity of the home.
They didn't just stop with dogs, though. They went to the air.
A SLED helicopter was deployed. Deputies on the ground fanned out over a much larger radius. They checked a hiking trail near Interstate 20 that Tammy was known to use sometimes.
Were there any sightings? Usually when a flyer goes out, people start seeing things, whether they're real or not.
There were reports. A notice was distributed across the central Savannah River area. There was one report of a white female walking along Interstate 20 in Columbia County, Georgia. That's about 30 miles west of where she disappeared.
30 miles? Could she have walked 30 miles in that condition, in that heat?
It is highly improbable, given the time frames and her documented physical state.
Yeah.
That sighting was never confirmed to be Tammy.
So the immediate professional search yields absolutely zero. Park Kingery is obviously desperate at this point. I understand he organized his own search about a week later.
Yes. He had personally traveled as far as Atlanta looking for her. A week after she vanished, he organized a volunteer search. Family, friends, people from the community, they printed flyers. They asked truck drivers to carry the flyers to other states, trying to get the word out.
And these volunteers, they went back into those same woods near the house. And this is where the story takes a turn into something. I mean, something out of a horror movie. They found something the police hadn't emphasized.
The volunteers were searching deep in the woods in a very dense area, thick with briars. And they caught a scent, a foul odor.
They must have thought they had found her.
They did. They followed the smell to an abandoned wooden shack. It was a small, dilapidated structure, almost hidden in the overgrowth.
And what was inside?
A collection of disturbing items. There were sponges, there were gloves, and there was a plastic bag containing a dead dog.
A dead dog in a plastic bag.
Yes, that was the source of the stench.
Now, surely this has to mean something. Someone killed a dog, bagged it, and left it in a shack with what sound like cleaning supplies. That feels ritualistic, or at least indicative of someone very disturbed nearby.
The interpretation of this evidence is divided. The volunteers and the family's friends found it deeply alarming. One family friend was quoted saying, "Someone went to a lot of trouble to put that dead dog there."
Right.
Their perspective was that even if it wasn't directly related to Tammy, it showed that dangerous or disturbed individuals were operating in the immediate vicinity of the Kingery home.
And what did the police say about it?
The sheriff's office stated that they'd already checked that shed during their initial sweep of the area. They dismissed it as being unrelated to the disappearance.
Yes, dismissed it.
They viewed it as debris or refuse that was not connected to the case.
That's a hard thing for a family to hear. It creates a real disconnect between the official investigation and the family's perception of the danger. But speaking of strange leads, let's talk about the motorcycle. This is another thread that just sort of dangles there.
Tammy had an interest in motorcycles. Park's family was enthusiastic about them, so it was part of her life. There were two distinct leads that came in regarding a motorcycle that day.
And one of them came from her own daughter, right?
Correct. The daughter, Caitlin, she claimed that while she was in the car with her friend, remember they were driving around looking for her mother, she actually saw her mother as a passenger on a motorcycle.
Saw her? Where?
Passing them near the home. She claimed she saw her, but by the time they turned the car around to try and follow, they couldn't find it.
Visual identification from a moving car is notoriously tricky. It's so easy for the brain to project what it wants or expects to see.
That is a well-documented phenomenon in eyewitness testimony. However, it wasn't just visual. There was also auditory evidence.
What was that?
A neighbor reported hearing a loud engine. They described it as a vehicle with a very loud engine, possibly a motorcycle, leaving the Kingery driveway shortly after Park had left with the sons.
So if you put those two things together, you have a theory. Park leaves, a motorcycle pulls up, Tammy gets on, and they leave. That would explain why the dogs didn't find a walking trail.
It would. It would also explain how she could have left the area so quickly. However, despite these reports, police were never able to locate a motorcycle or any evidence of one being at the scene. No tire tracks, no confirmed sightings on any CCTV on the main roads. It remains an unverified lead.
Okay, so let's pivot now to the husband, Park Kingery. In almost every spousal disappearance case, the husband is the first person the police look at.
That is standard investigative procedure. The spouse is always the primary person of interest until they are cleared. Park underwent significant scrutiny.
We already established his alibi with the store cameras, but the police went deeper than that.
They did. They reinvestigated him thoroughly. They checked his cell phone pings. They conducted independent interviews with the sons to make sure they hadn't been coached on their story. Everything corroborated his timeline of running those errands.
What about the polygraph? This is always a point of contention in these cases.
Park did take a lie detector test. The results, however, are clouded by conflicting accounts of what those results were.
Conflicting how? Who was saying what?
Well, Park told Tammy's mother that the test simply made him nervous. Later, in an interview he did with a podcast about a year after the disappearance, Park claimed the police told him some of the results were questionable.
Questionable. That's a very vague word.
It is. But then, in 2016, Park appeared on the TV show Disappeared. In that interview, he stated that the police had specifically asked him not to discuss the results of the polygraph at all.
So we have 3 different stories. Nervous, questionable, and no comment. It's important to remember, though, that polygraphs aren't admissible in court for a reason. They measure stress, not deception.
That is the critical distinction. A polygraph measures autonomic arousal, heart rate, respiration, skin conductivity. An innocent person whose wife has just vanished would naturally be under extreme physiological stress during an interrogation. We can't infer guilt solely from a messy polygraph situation.
And we also have to look at the aftermath for Park. If he was involved, there's usually a motive: money, freedom, a new life. What happened to Park financially after Tammy was gone?
He was financially destroyed. Tammy, as a nurse, was the primary earner in the household. With her income gone, the family finances collapsed completely. Park mentioned spending $4,000 of his own retirement funds just on the initial search efforts: flyers, gas, supplies.
He went broke trying to find her.
He eventually had to file for bankruptcy. The house and the vehicles were in Tammy's name, which created huge legal hurdles for him. He ended up losing the house they'd built together.
Where did he go?
He had to move into his parents' basement at almost 50 years old. He was quoted as saying, "There was nothing I could do."
That does not paint the picture of a man who orchestrated a disappearance to, live the high life.
No, it does not. It paints a picture of a man dealing with a catastrophic loss of stability in every sense.
Now, the police did look into Tammy's phone records, and they found something that maybe Park didn't know about.
They found deleted text messages. These messages were between Tammy and 2 different men.
Romantic messages.
The police described them as romantic in nature. This aligns with the reports of extramarital affairs that were mentioned in her medical history.
Did these men have anything to do with her disappearance?
Police investigated both individuals thoroughly. They determined that neither man had any involvement in her disappearance. Both were cleared.
So we've cleared the husband's alibi, we've cleared the secret romantic interests, we have a missing woman and a locked house. Let's start looking at the theories that have emerged over the years.
The theories generally fall into 3 main categories: she ran away, suicide, or foul play.
Okay, let's start with the runaway theory. Park seemed to lean this way at first, didn't he?
He did. He pointed to her depression. He told a local TV station that she would sometimes tell him she just needed to get away. The theory was that the pressure of her life became too much, and she simply left to start over somewhere else.
But she left her money, her car, her keys, and her phone. That is a very, very difficult way to start over.
It is. And statistically, people who walk away to start a new life usually take resources with them. It's incredibly difficult to exist in modern society without any digital or financial footprint.
Okay, so then there's the suicide theory.
Given the prior attempts and the clinical depression, this is a strong possibility that has to be considered. The theory is that she walked deep into the woods to end her life, perhaps seeking a place where she wouldn't be found.
But Maude,
That is the significant flaw in this theory. If she died in the woods, even deep in the woods, a body would typically be found eventually by hunters, hikers, land developers. The chief investigator on the case stated in 2016 that a body in water would have surfaced by then, and a body on land would likely have been discovered.
which leaves us with foul play. Someone took her.
The family and eventually the police began to lean toward what they called suspicious circumstances. The locked door remains the central pivot point for this theory.
Right.
If she left voluntarily either to run away or to commit suicide, how did the door get locked from the outside when her keys were inside?
It implies a second person, someone else with a key, or someone who locked the door and took their key with them.
Exactly. Park himself later said, "I've always thought maybe someone just got in the house and took her."
There was a moment, though, in 2016 where it seemed like everyone might finally get an answer, and that was because of Todd Kohlhepp.
Yes. Todd Kohlhepp was a serial killer arrested in South Carolina. He had a large property where he kept victims chained in shipping containers. When that news broke, there was immediate grim hope that Tammy might be one of the victims found on his property.
They did DNA testing on the remains they found.
They did. None of the bodies or the evidence found on Kohlhepp's property matched Tammy Kingery, so that door was closed.
But then we jump forward to 2021, 7 years after she disappeared. And this story gets a truly bizarre modern twist involving her daughter, Caitlin.
This is what's known as the Chris Slade incident. Caitlin, who is now an adult, was contacted on Facebook by a user with the name Chris Slade.
And what did this person want?
He claimed to have information about her mother's case. He proved he knew some details, specifically identifying what kind of car her father, Park, drove. But the interaction was predatory. He offered this information in exchange for sexual favors.
That is just disturbing on multiple levels.
It then escalated into a blackmail attempt.
What did Caitlin do?
She did her own investigation. She traced the username and found an Instagram profile with the same name. The profile bio claimed the user had combat training. She compiled everything, all the text messages, the profile screenshots, all of it.
And she took it to the police.
She did. She handed all of the documentation over to law enforcement.
And what happened?
And according to a 2023 update on the case, nothing happened. The Edgefield County Deputy Sheriff, who had since taken over the case, stated he had never received that documentation.
It was lost.
It appears the evidence Caitlin gathered was lost, or simply not filed correctly by the previous investigators. The new deputy promised to look into it, but it was a significant lapse in the chain of investigation.
So you have someone actively taunting the daughter of a missing woman, claiming to have knowledge, and the police file it vanishes.
It speaks to the immense frustration the family has faced. Whether Chris Slade was just a cruel hoaxer, which happens often in these high-profile cases, or someone who actually knew something, we may never know because the lead wasn't pursued at the time.
So where does that leave this case today?
Tammy remains a missing person. There is no active reward for information, which is unusual for a case that has gone on this long. The police classification is officially suspicious circumstances, but without a body or a crime scene, it is a cold case.
And Park.
He's attempting to rebuild his life, but the financial and emotional toll has been total.
It really just comes back to those unanswered questions, the physiological state she was in.
High blood pressure, dizziness, elevated heart rate, not a state conducive to a long trek through the woods.
The paradox of the locked house.
Keys inside, door locked from the outside. The puzzle piece that simply does not fit.
And that note, that sign-off, love you.
Was it a goodbye, or was it just a habit?
It is a case where the more you look at the evidence, the less sense any of it makes. You have a shed with a dead dog that police say is nothing. You have a motorcycle that no one can find. You have a message from a stranger years later that gets lost in a file cabinet.
And in the center of it all, a woman who simply ceased to exist on a Saturday morning.
And we want to leave you with a final thought on that Chris Slade message. We often dismiss internet trolls as just noise, but consider the specificity. He knew about the car. In a case where a loud vehicle, maybe a motorcycle, was heard leaving the scene, and a user claiming combat training appears in the daughter's inbox years later, was that just a lucky guess by a stranger, or was it a ghost from the past reaching out?
It is a question that demands an answer.
Thanks for listening.